Hello and welcome to another episode of Words with Myself.
I'm going to preface this episode with a question, and I want you to hear the question, listen to it, understand what it means and what the question is really asking, and then wait for an answer to arise and see what you naturally lean towards. So, what percentage of your feelings do you feel like are your own? So just pause here, have a think about it, and then I'm going to assume that we've already done that. So, it could have been 100. It could have been 0. It could have been 50. It could have been any number that you believe. I think most people would naturally believe that it's 100%, that all of their feelings are their own. And by way of the paradoxes of life, it is both true and untrue. All of your feelings are your own. It is you who is experiencing the feeling. Therefore, it is yours. It is your feeling. However, we also inherit feelings. There are times where, let's say, somebody is angry, and then because they are angry, we get angry, and we inherit their anger. And we may not have been angry at all before, but because they are angry, we've now taken that on, and now we're angry too. In one sense, we have to choose whether subconsciously or consciously to be angry. There may be some wound or some trigger or some trauma that we react to anger by being also angry. But if that person wasn't initially angry, you wouldn't have inherited it. You wouldn't have been feeling that way. So, in some way, it is your own, and some way, it is theirs. And understanding this is important because sometimes we default to believing that we are feeling that feeling, when it can be that we have inherited that feeling. For instance, I believed that I was quite socially anxious, but instead, I'm actually just very empathetic. And when I'm in a social interaction with someone else, if they are socially anxious, I almost adopt that feeling. I feel their anxiety, and then it becomes my own. Many times I wasn't anxious at all, but because they were anxious, or I hadn't even identified them as being anxious, but the conversation felt really difficult. If I felt nervous, there was all of this kind of difficulties, and I immediately looked inwards and thought, this is me, I'm not being confident, I'm not speaking how I normally would, or I'm being awkward, making a load of judgments about myself without realizing that that experience was actually inherited from the person in front of me. And the more I realized this, the more I realized I do this in many aspects of my life. And we all do. We all have these judgments and these feelings that come up, and we take them personally. We believe that they're ours, and sometimes they are, but other times they're not. And we can find ourselves, especially if you're highly empathetic or an empath, you will find yourself feeling certain things and believing that you feel a certain way, and it won't be yours. It will be someone else's. You feel depressed, you feel isolated, you feel old, you feel lonely, you feel upset, you feel unhealthy. As an empath, you can inherit all of these feelings from other people. You take them on as your own. And when you're hearing people complain about things or moan about their life or say that they feel a certain way very strongly and it's a constant rhetoric that you're around, it becomes very easy to lose yourself in that other person's feeling, to take it on as your own and believe that it is yours, instead of realizing that is an environmental thing. And you know me, I'm all about looking inward and doing the shadow work and realizing where your feelings come from and where your triggers are and where your trauma is and what you're hiding and all this kind of stuff. But sometimes, on the other side of that, sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it's inherited from the world outside, and we take it on as our own, and we make it as a part of our identity. And really, we've all done that. Over the course of our lives, we have adopted the model of the world around us. All of us grew up mirroring the people closest to us. That is how we grew our identity, by learning from others and taking bits and pieces. And some people are very unique because they take little bits and pieces from lots of people. And sometimes someone is very much like one person because they took a lot from one person, one source of inspiration. And the more you become aware of this mirroring process, the more you will become aware of your ego. You will see it playing out, how it shapes to different people, how you perform for different people, how each experience you conjure up this personality to manifest for the person in front of you or the group in front of you. And with this awareness, you can't help but go, oh, that's not me. This is something else. I'm different to this, or more whole than that, or that's a piece of me, but that's not all of me. These are the glimmers of you that you present to other people, and many people present the same image over and over again. They become very consistent. So people say, well, I know who you are. But you're not who you are. It's not a fixed thing. You are constantly changing. You have new information, new ideas. Even if you don't see it in the micro, you are changing on the macro. And even if your life hasn't changed much, you might be more fed up of it than you were 10 years ago. You are probably more accepting, but more hardened, less optimistic, more pessimistic, or more afraid because you've been comfortable for a longer period of time. You cannot avoid changing. You either change or life changes you. As they say, change is the only constant. So what we become aware of is the individual as part of the collective. How you are not separate from the world, but it is part of you and part of who you believe you to be. If you were born into this world and it was nothing but white space and there was no one else around, no buildings, no nature, no world, it was just white space everywhere, your experience would be so dramatically different. You would have no words, no language, no one to communicate to, nothing to identify or to interact with. And let's suppose that you had a body, but you couldn't die. But there was nothing to eat, nothing to taste. You couldn't say, I like this, or I've done this. You couldn't say, I anything, because there would be nothing to base it on. There'd be no input. You have to exist as part of the external world. You are separate, but together, in the same way that light cannot be without darkness, and darkness cannot be without light. They are separate, but also one. They are together. They cannot exist without each other. And that is your experience with the world. But what happens is we get obsessed with self-identifying as separate. We believe that we exist separate from the world, separate from nature. There is us and something else. And you may say, well, humans are different to everything else. But humans are all different. And if there was no language barrier, you'd probably find out that you have a lot more in common with a tree than you probably think you do. Maybe they're having the same experience as us. Maybe they have existential crises and they're self-conscious because they don't have the nicest leaves or the tallest branches. We have no idea. But the point is that you are separate with the world and together with it. And when you realize that and you become aware of it and you put it into something grounded in human experience, right? Not some mystical saying and you can go, oh yeah, I know that to be true. I am one with the universe and all that. But so what? The tree isn't working a 9 to 5. The bugs aren't going to school tomorrow. So what difference does it really make to me whether I'm one with the universe or separate? Now I know this. What do I do about it? How do I integrate that truth into my life? And the reason people find it so difficult to put divine truth into existential practice is because they're all paradoxes. Yes, the world is creating you, but you are also creating the world. Your perspective, your thoughts, your feelings are also manifesting into the world. For instance, just like me being anxious around people in a social setting, by me being anxious and me feeling anxious because they're feeling anxious, that anxiety is amplified. So they feel more anxious. So if they were feeling anxious initially, but I didn't take that on, and I was warm and welcoming and inviting and confident, then maybe they would have responded in kind. Maybe they would have had a completely different experience. They would have felt safe to open up and engage with you, and they wouldn't have felt anxious. But because it was two people, both picking up on each other's anxiety, it eroded. It became a social breakdown. So not only did they impact me, I then in turn impacted them, and then the whole world, the whole experience was different. We have no possible telling of how different the world could be if that interaction was different. We're all aware of the butterfly effect and how one small thing can manifest into something huge. You may have missed an opportunity to make a friend for life. How different would your life be if you had engaged with this person in a slightly different way, found out that they were very much like you and a similar person to you and that you'd be great friends, and then you had them for life? That's not something unreasonable or something improbable or impossible. That's actually something that is quite possible to happen. You could meet someone and make friends with them, and even if they're not your very best friend, they still had an impact on your life. And even though I had an anxious experience with somebody, it still shaped my life because it made me realize that I actually wasn't anxious. Not in that moment anyway. I was feeling their anxiety and I felt like it was my own. But because I had that experience, that's now shaped how I interact with people going forward. So this conversation with somebody that lasted all of 30 seconds that seems very insignificant has actually transformed and changed my entire life. And when you start paying attention, you realize that you can have these life-transforming experiences all the time, constantly, if you're open to it, if you're willing to change, if you're willing to look at the data or the experience objectively, if you're willing to look at both sides, if you're willing to look at truth and not truth, light and darkness, if you're willing to open yourself up to new ideas, new experiences, rather than staying rooted in old identity and old beliefs, you can have a very different life. You can become a completely different person just from a small interaction. And even without an interaction, you can have a life-changing experience anywhere, anytime. I was just walking in the woods today and had one. But when you are so rooted and fixed and determined that you know who you are and you have this identity and you try to maintain it, you block out new information. You turn a blind eye to it. You refuse new experience. You refuse opportunity. You may say you're not confident, but how do you know? It's the present moment. You're just saying, I haven't been confident previously. There's nothing saying that you can't go out tomorrow and be the most confident person ever. You could just one day wake up and decide that you're confident and say, I'm confident. I walk into a room and I ooze confidence. Every time I have a social interaction, it goes amazingly. I'm not someone who can't talk to someone. Of course I can talk to someone. They're just another person, just like me. What do I have to be anxious about? Why are you so determined that you are not confident, or that you are depressed, or that you are this, or that you are that? Why are you so determined to keep that image of you alive? Because you are creating that. And the world is returning in kind and creating that world for you. You believe, you have that experience, and it manifests. We all talk about manifestation, but no one wants to really address how you are manifesting the entire world. By behaving in the way that you behave, by speaking in the way that you speak, by interacting with people the way you interact with people, by holding your beliefs, by doing your patterns and habits and all that kind of stuff, it all changes the world. Every time. Every day there's something changing the world. Probably millions and billions of times every day. And we have no idea and no awareness of it. Because if we did, we would see that nothing about us is fixed. That nothing in this world is fixed and everything is subject to change. And that we are changing constantly, whether we want to or not, whether we see it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. We are changing. And you can change in any way you want to. You are deciding who you are every day you wake up. And these changes can happen slowly or rapidly. They can happen right in front of our eyes, or they can happen over an extended period of time. When we look at the micro every day, we see, okay, well, we can make a little bit of change, and then in a year that has a huge impact, or in 3 months that has a huge impact. If you ate really healthily and went to the gym every day for the next 3 months, there would be a significant impact on your health and how you look. By deciding to do that, committing to it and doing it every day, you have drastically changed yourself. Even your values have changed. You probably value and prioritize health now much more than you did before. You might have prioritized fun or enjoyment or dopamine before, and now you prioritize health and happiness and peace. And then you're a completely different person. People might say, people can't just change overnight, but why not? Why is that not possible? There's no tangible reason. You are all existing as part of history, and your memory is teaching you who you are. But you are not your memory. You are not past events. You cannot pluck it up and say, here it is. This is what happened. This is why I am the way I am. Because it doesn't exist today. In this present moment, it doesn't exist. It only exists because you remember it, and you remember yourself in that way, and you remember yourself going through these experiences. But it doesn't exist today. And you are subject to change. You can change dramatically in any way. If you say you're a nervous person or an anxious person, you can become the most confident person in the world. If you say that you're unathletic and you don't do well in sports, instead you could become an athlete. You could do something that you enjoy, or maybe you don't enjoy, but you enjoy it once you start getting good at it. And then all of a sudden you're committed to it, and it's completely changed who you are. It's changed your perspective on life. It's changed who you hang around with. It's changed your day-to-day experiences. It's changed your health. It's changed your mindset. You have become a different version of you. And you can do this anytime, any day, and any moment. You can change. And the only thing that is keeping you the same, and not even really the same, but a consistent version of your identity, is your belief that that is who you are. And once you change that belief, you change you. Thank you for listening.